Yo, dude.
Oh, wait.
I can hear you.
Oh, I'm muted.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Hello?
Can you
Hey,
hear me now?
yeah, perfect. I'm that guy. You're on mute.
It looks clean. I mean, I think we're
Yeah, it's
good.
good. We have excellent Wi-Fi here somehow.
Um, the magic of modern technology, man. How about that?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure like the whole world ran on this kind of stuff recently. So we'll probably be
Yeah, I
fine.
think so. They got it all sorted out in the last 2 years.
Can you hear? I have AC on. Do you
It's
hear
all
anything?
good.
All good.
No problem whatsoever. Thank you, though. Good morning, Jon Pyzel. What are you doing in Bali?
Good morning. I am here. I'm just surfing and we my my family, we've been coming here for a long time, for the last like 15 years or so.
Wow.
Actually more now, probably 17 years. But then every summer we usually come down here for like a month, sometimes 2 months at a time. And we haven't been able to come for the last 3 years. So this is the first time I've been back in a long time. We come and stay out by Uluwatu every year. And so we kind of have it's a real like, it's kind of a community out here. It's pretty cool where they've seen my kids grow up here, all the local people, and like it's pretty classic.
What an
It's pretty
amazing
feeling.
family
Yeah. So
tradition.
yeah, it's awesome. And unfortunately my two daughters aren't here on this trip yet, but my wife and I are here, and yeah, it's cool. So just been
How old,
surfing. And
how old are your kids?
two girls. Sienna is 19 and my older daughter Indy is 24.
Gotcha.
And
Um,
Indy really like, Indy's the surfer. Sienna's not, she's more of a horse kid. But like Sienna learned how to swim when she was 2 years old here in Bali in a pool, like right down the road.
that's
And then
incredible.
Indy got into surfing at Ulu's. Like she surfed a little bit, and we would always go on trips here. She's kind of surfed a tiny bit at home. Like she always surfed, but not much. And then one summer we were here, I think she was 12, and one of her friends was with her too. And Mikey Wright was here. He was 13, and they ended up surfing a bunch together out here. And like she just got hooked on surfing at Ula's. It was pretty cool. She was like, "Dad, it's too gnarly there." I'm like, "No, we live in Hawaii. It's actually not as gnarly here." And she's
No,
like, "What are
no.
you talking about?" So it was pretty cool. So that's been she's kind of, and she comes back here. India will come back here on her own, just by herself even, and take trips here and surf and stuff. It's cool.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Are you going to G-Land?
I'm not going to, I don't, as far as like the contest, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, I don't think I even really can. I don't think, I think it's probably kind of a closed environment. And I don't know for sure, but the other thing is I don't really want to go there. It's all the best guys in the world are there. Like you don't really get a great surf in when those guys are out, like, and it's kind of a weird place to watch. It's super far outside and stuff. I don't know. I can't imagine
Gotcha.
really being there for a contest and like sitting around and be kind of strange, I think. But
Gotcha.
I would like to go to G-Land and surf at some point on this trip.
Are you building boards in Bali?
Yeah, we have a pretty solid business here, and I've been doing it. I came here in like, the first time I made surfboards here was like, I don't know how many years ago. My friend Pete Matthews from Hawaii had moved down here, and he met up with this German guy, Basti, he used to make snowboards. And he's like, now I'm making surfboards. Like he just switched over. It was kind of funny. He moved here, and I came and I hand shaped like 20 boards, and it was a 10-day trip. And he invited me down, like, hey, let's see how it goes. And like I had to hand shape 20 boards. It was the worst shaping experience of my life for sure. Like the shaping room was just hideously hot. Like the AC barely worked. It was just miserable. This tiny space didn't even really have a door. You had to like you had to like crawl through this area to get in there. And then the blanks were like the worst blanks of all time, like terrible to shape. But I managed to like get through 20 boards on that trip. And it was funny. I think about it all the time because now like our like Pyzel boards are doing great here in Bali. Like I trip out, I go and paddle out and see my boards are in the lineup everywhere and stuff. And if I hadn't like toughed it out through it, like I literally wanted to quit shaping during that trip. I was just
Right.
like, this is terrible. Like, what am I doing here? You know, but that set the foundation, and Basti kind of saw like, okay, this guy's willing to like push through stuff and make it work, you know?
Yeah.
So today,
What's changed there? Is it just that they have access to better raw materials now,
yeah,
or it seems
it
like
was,
there's a whole industry?
yeah, it's really good. It's booming, and there's just so many people, and they're what back then it was like there weren't many people actually building boards here on any kind of a scale. There was probably guys building a few boards here and there, whatever. But as far as actually like doing production and taking like a brand of some sort, and I mean, I was barely a brand at all then anyways, but um to now where like there's shape, like my first trip was hand shaping. So the next time I'm like, dude, that was miserable. You're going to order blanks from Australia anyways. So let's get them cut. We'll order boards that are pre-shaped and they'll ship them here instead of blanks. And I can come finish boards. So we ordered we did 60 boards or whatever it was the next time. It was like the next year. And that was like changed for me, made it way easier. I'm building boards that way, but you couldn't do custom boards for people that way. And then now fast forward to today where like there's multiple shaping machines. He has Australian foam, Australian resin, you know, everything's just like top quality.
Good.
Really nice factory, big place. He does my boards and he does DHDs.
Okay.
So that's his, and then he does some like custom labels for like a shop called Drifter and a few different things like that. It's pretty cool.
And the local workers too probably have a decade or two of experience under their belt now, right?
Yeah, the boards are beautiful. Like I didn't make the boards myself. I didn't shape them, but I had some boards made for me on my way before I got here because I'm like, oh, I want to have some boards waiting. I brought some boards myself too, but I just picked them up yesterday and like they're beautiful, you know, like I'm like, wow, this is insane. If this came out of my factory, I'd be super happy. So it's pretty
Awesome.
cool. Yeah. And
Glad
like
to
the
hear it.
shape, everything, like all parts of it, not just not just the glassing, but like the shape's really good. The guy's been doing my boards here for years and it's got it really dialed.
Good.
Do nice. So it's pretty cool.
So I want to kick off the conversation with Tyler Wright and allow you to set the record straight with any misconceptions that I might have given to our audience. What are my misconceptions about Tyler Wright?
My weird little one sentence text I send you every once in a while. Just like, what are you talking about?
You're not wrong. I mean, set me straight.
No, it's true. It's funny. It's funny listening to podcasts because even not just you guys talking, whoever, and I listen to a lot of surf podcasts because I'm just like a weird surf junkie. I've always been that way. Like I used to buy every surf magazine, and that's my deal. I like to just like absorb a lot of it, and so it's funny because being kind of a little more on the inside with a lot of that stuff or whatever it is like I hear people talking, I'm like, oh, that's not right. Like that's a little off or whatever, you know?
Totally.
Not like anything bad usually. But yeah, that thing that I was talking to you about with Tyler the other day was just that like talking about like, oh, she didn't get barreled or she didn't, you know, it's like, well, actually she got really barreled and like Tyler sends it. Like she is gnarly. Like she grew up in the middle of those kids, like between Owen and Mikey, like both those guys are gnarly. And she was just like right there in the mix with them too, you know? And I remember I read or heard something somewhere what she was saying. She's like, Owen just told me like, always go for the biggest wave of the set. Don't try to get like the smaller one because you're safest on the biggest one because there won't be a bigger one behind it, you know? And that's where she comes from. So just Tyler sends it. And she's definitely not like, although everybody looking at pipeline, even the best guys, I think, are sometimes look out there and go like, wow, this is pretty gnarly out there or whatever. I don't think you could say that Tyler Wright was in any way shying away from like, hey, I'm out there. If it's on, I'm out there and I'll do what I can, you know?
Well,
literally she pulled us in like big, I tried to find a video to see like she pulled in this gnarly closeout. Like
I got it. I found it.
Yeah.
I found it. It was
nuts.
so they've run two, let's say one and a portion of the women's events now at Pipe. The one obviously a year and a half ago, where it started in Maui, got interrupted by the shark attack, sadly. And then they ran, I think, the semifinals and the finals at Pipe. And so that I was kind of conflating when I was talking to Scott on Spit, conflating that event with the recent event and my overall perception of Tyler. And so in that event, though, the first one, you're right. She packed, it was the heat, I think, against Carissa. So it'd be the, I guess, the final. She packed a crazy closeout at backdoor.
That was a big solid wave. Like
totally.
I would not go on that wave.
Totally. Nor would I, for the record. But throughout, so, and then, you know, got it was a closeout, so she didn't get a meaningful score. So then Carissa, though, was trying to get shacked for the rest of the heat. Tyler, having not put a score on the board, then got a wave and did turns, got a score, put the pressure on Carissa, then got another wave that she did turns on, got another score. Carissa, I think, only made one marginal barrel, but for the viewer, it's like it should be a tube riding contest. Carissa's looking for the tube, not making it. Tyler's relying on turns. And to her credit, she's a savvy competitor. She won the heat. She won the first women's event at Pipe. That was the impression left with me, the viewer, you know.
It was like she won on doing a turn on a wave that wasn't that great. Right.
Exactly.
I agree. I would say the same thing. I think that if you asked her, she would probably be like, she's super stoked she won that event, but not like like she would have been way happier winning it, getting barreled. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's not like she's like, I don't want to get barreled. That's kind of my thought, was just like, hey, that's not where she's coming from. Like, oh, I'd rather just do turns, safety turns on the face and win this thing. She would have rather, but she was just doing what she could with what was out there, I think, more.
The waves weren't great.
Yeah. And even that's a tough wave for someone that doesn't get a lot of opportunity to surf it. I used to surf pipeline a lot when I was really young, and it's just gnarly. And if you don't put in a lot of time to just get used to what it's like and picking out the right waves and all this stuff, I mean, it's pretty difficult to just like jump into it. And for anybody, and to have it when it's, especially when like you're not choosing your conditions, like it's one thing to be like a free surfer and you're like, oh, pipe's firing, I'm going to go out there and like hopefully I'll luck into a really good wave or whatever. When you're actually getting sent out there where it's actually pretty crappy, and then you have to try to find a wave, and then people are like, you didn't even get barreled, that didn't count or whatever. It's like, well, she didn't say like, I'm stoked on these conditions, let's get out there. It's like they would have loved to be getting barreled, I think.
Well,
Chris as well, every one of them, you know, that I can imagine of the women.
I would imagine at kind of there's a lot of top level pros who would be wanting your boards, considering your track record with Jon and whatever, but I don't see a ton of them on the CT. Are you just discerning about who you work with, or how exactly do you go through that process? And specifically with Tyler, why work with Tyler? When did you first connect with Tyler, and how did that all happen?
Well, I'll answer the first part first. Is basically for me, I started working with Jon when he was so young, Jon, and then where I couldn't afford or whatever to have a bigger team. No one wanted it. Like before people really had faith in my boards or whatever, however you want to put it. And so I just really focused on Jon. And as Jon got better and better, he's so good that like he's done so much to elevate us. Like he's helped me immensely, like unbelievably, right?
Sure.
And so I always really wanted to focus on him. And like I feel like almost a debt to him, and not like anything that it's not like real that way, but like I'm just very grateful for our relationship and the way that it's helped my shaping and then like my business and everything. And just on a personal level, we're good friends. It's like he's a great kid. And so for me, I always looked at like, I don't really understand almost when I see guys with like sponsoring all these different people. Like there's guys that have like their team riders are going head to head and heat after heat. Like to me, it's too emotional almost. I'm like, I'm invested in this kid as like a person, as like part of my business, as all this stuff. So to bring in somebody else or 10 different people and then have them all competing like them all. I want that guy to be the world champ. And I think that's one of the major differences is like that his caliber of surfing allows me to believe, like, I'm like, hey, I've got the best horse in the business. Why would I try to have 5 other horses take him down on his way to the top? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that in that sense. And kind of, I feel the same with Tyler. Like I totally do. Like she's incredible. She's a 2-time world champ, not on my board. She was riding Matt's boards then. And she's super good. I have another girl, India Robinson, riding my boards this year. And she came through from my Australian guys. Like they choose, my licensees in Australia will choose their own team riders, you know, they pick them, and with my blessings or whatever you want to call it. But to me, it's just really been like, hey, I don't want to help someone else beat my main guys that like, that's the guy I want to win, you know? And the other part of that too, is like, you only have so much energy and time and where you can really focus on people. And I don't want to be like shuffling that off to another shaper or to, you know, I don't have a team manager. Like I'm the team manager, you know? Right. And so I'm dealing with everyone directly, and I don't have the energy to be making 30 board quivers for 5 guys or any, you know, or girls or whatever. And so to me, I've always just liked to be more focused on that. And it's funny sometimes, like I'll watch contests and I'm like, wow, I've only got this one hope, you know, to win this or whatever. But luckily, or not luckily, but just the way it is that hope is pretty solid, you know? And I believe Tyler is really solid too. And so it just feels good. Like that's just my, and I have a lot of team riders that are outside of the CT. Right. You know, I make boards for a lot of guys that are really good surfers, but I've purposely kept it away from that. And even with Jon, I'll stop after that, the run-on response. But
no, it's good.
I've had like Jack Freestone. I made boards for Jack for like 3 years on tour, and he had his best results. He had his best year ever on my boards and did really well. And he's changed direction since then, which is totally fine, and moved on to something else. But like, I literally asked Jon, like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, how do you feel about me making boards for Jack? And in that case, Jack was he was based in Australia. It was more of an Australian thing, and it's going to help my brand in Australia a lot. Like, he's a great surfer. He's like a nice person. So he's a good thing for our company. And Jon was like, yeah, no problem. Like, that's good. I feel good about that, you know? But I've turned down a lot of opportunities to make boards for people. And sometimes I don't know, sometimes I'm like, wow, this is pretty radical to say no to these guys, but it feels right. It feels right.
Can you say any of those names?
I don't want to, it's no big deal, but just, and the thing is too, I guess I'll say one last part of it is, when I work with people, I want to work with them 100%. I don't want to, there's a lot of people that have come to me that aren't like, I want to be on your team necessarily, as so much as like, I'd like to get some boards, or like, I want to try a ghost. That's like the number one thing that I've heard from people. And to me, I'm like, what's the point of me making you 3 boards and then what? Then you beat Jon in the semis somewhere or in the 3rd round, and I was a part of that. And then what do I get out of it? Nothing, because in the next contest you're riding somebody else's boards, you know?
Yeah. So it's,
I mean, there's more of that. There's way more of that, just to be clear, of like, let me get some boards from you, than like, hey, I want to be on your team kind of thing. You know, it's more like they want to feel it out, and maybe it might develop into a full-on relationship, but I have a hard time going that route.
So I'm going to ask you to speak for Jon, or give me your impression, because you're right. Your brand is synonymous. Your eggs are all in that basket. Totally. It puts a lot of weight on Jon, actually. And I could see that weight was on him maybe when he was young, the weight of his family. Like, he's this prodigy and he has expectations. And so from a very young age, it's like, hey, you're doing this for us. You're also doing it for the community. Then your brand is involved. So he's really responsible. There's a certain weight for your brand. Now he's got his clothing brand where he's actually employing people. Yeah. And that's actually, he wears it well. Like, you don't see the burden on him, but I'm just curious, do you think that he feels the responsibility of these dozens of families whose businesses ultimately rely on him at this point?
Well, I can't speak for him specifically, but like for us, like between he and I don't feel like there's ever been like a thing where he feels like, oh, if I don't, like I've always told Jon from the beginning that like, hey, if you feel like riding somebody else's boards is going to help you get to what you want to do, then don't make it about me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want you to ever look back and be like, God, I shouldn't have stuck with him. That was a big mistake. I could have had 5 world titles because of this or whatever, you know? And obviously when I say that, I'm hoping that that's not, you know, I told him that, I told him that, I'm like, please let this work out. I'm really stoked on this situation. And just as a person, but to me, my personal relationship with him is more important than my business with him. Like, so that's just the bottom line is like, hey, if that was the way you need to go, then you can go that way, please, without worrying about it. And so hopefully that is something that he truly like felt and knew, and he made his decision based on the boards working for him and like us working together and all that. As far as like his other parts of it, I can't really say how he feels about that at all, but I do know that he's just a really like on it person that likes to get really involved with what he's doing. And he's not like, he doesn't just take things lightly that he gets involved with. If he's actually like, it's funny because I think in surfing, there's a lot of people that just have a sticker on their board based on the paycheck. Sure. And his stickers on his boards, basically they're connected to paychecks, obviously. But I think if you like, for me, what I know is that he thinks about each one of those relationships and like chooses things specifically that he's actually proud to be a part of. You know what I mean? He's not just like, well, these guys, but they paid me more than that guy, so I'll put that color sticker on there. He looks at what he's actually promoting, you know?
It's a unique situation because if you think about Kelly was the marquee athlete for a very long time, obviously. But Al Merrick and Channel Islands had a very diverse portfolio of riders. So if Kelly went away, it wasn't going to necessarily do much to their business. Quicksilver, same thing. Even modern examples, Gabriel Medina, you know, those brands aren't reliant necessarily on him continuing to do what he does. But Jon, it's a kind of a unique situation. And I think it is organic in all the ways that you said, and it feels very natural. The partnerships feel natural, and they certainly started from friendship probably, but I wonder if he feels any of that weight of like carrying, you know,
I'm sure he must to some degree. You know, I just think that he has a lot of confidence in who he's working with and dealing with too. And like the partnerships as far as like with Florence Marine, like how he's actually the people that work with him doing that stuff and like running it. And he's it's very purposeful, you know, he's very purposeful in his choices. It's not just like, I hope this works out. It's like, hey, I'm going to choose some of the best. I mean, look at Bob Hurley, like that guy's track record is spotless, you know, like that guy turns stuff to gold and is just a super nice person. And, you know, all those parts of it that are important and like ethical and, you know, not like there's a lot of kind of slimy characters not a lot, but there's some slimy characters in the surf world and people that are willing to kind of just do what they need to do. And I don't feel like those people are really the people like that. I mean, I know I don't want those kind of people in my life or business, and I don't think Jon does either, you know?
Yeah. It's talking about working with one athlete for a long period of time. You might have heard Scott and I brush on this topic over the years. We've kind of identified that the people who win multiple world titles, that is a common denominator. They have decade-long relationships with their shapers, and the surfers who are kind of right outside of that, winning those world titles, tend to change shapers more frequently throughout their career. So Gabriel Medina, long-term relationship with Cabianca, Kelly and Al, of course, Steph and DH, Jon and yourself. But Mick. I never thought, Mick, exactly. But I always thought of that as like the surfer getting to know your craft better. I never really thought of it from the way that you kind of described it 10 minutes ago, was you gleaning a lot of, you're also honing your craft by working
I'm not just
with
like, here, make this work. It's like, it works both ways for
the
sure.
feedback that you're getting from Jon is
I
equally
think
as
everyone's
valuable.
probably getting the same kind of, I mean, I don't know what kind of feedback exactly they're getting, but I know that if you're a shaper and you're not listening to your surfers, then you probably aren't doing as well as you could with your boards. You know, you want to have, that's kind of half the deal. It's like, if you're an F1 and your driver's telling you the car's not steering right, you don't just go like, well, turn it harder, you know, you fix it.
But they also don't understand the steering on year 1, 2, 3, or 4, as well as they
Right.
do on year 8, 9, and 10, you know?
Totally. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to it. I think maybe that it's, there's probably a psychological thing where you're like, have this, you're like, it's a trust thing. Jon will paddle out in 30-foot waves on a brand new board that he just whacks up and go on the biggest set, you know? And that's like, because over his entire life, he's ridden my boards and like, oh, these work. Like, he's not going to throw me like some curveball that's going to be like in this range, you know, or whatever. And then with him, for sure, is like the feedback that I get from him is he's phenomenal. Like he's like, if someone, if he started writing someone else's boards, they'd probably just be like, oh my God, this guy is just like tearing me apart, you know? But for me, that's like, it's not, we're so tuned that like the changes are pretty minimal. And like he's like, were the fin angles a little different on that board, or, you know, just stuff like we're measuring just crazy little things. And I'm like, wow, they were, you know, like, or did you use a different kind of blank, or just like crazy stuff that you would think like doesn't matter at all. And then it's like, oh yeah, you were right. Like he'll ask me about something and I'll find an old board that he's talking about. Like we were looking at, well, he was in Margaret's this year. We were talking on the phone. And he's like, I've been watching the footage from 2019 and that board just looks faster. Like, is it any different than the boards I have today right now? And I'm like, they're all there. And I open up the files because I have everything on the computer with all this different stuff. And I found the 2019 board in my stack of boards. It was buckled. And one of my guys that works for me, he's like, is this what you're talking about? And like, and I'm like, oh yeah, this thing was it was a half a liter less foam, same measurements, like same width and length, but a half a liter less, even though I had lied and written 29.6 on it. I looked at the file and it was 29 liters because I remember at the time him and Ross were convinced he needed more foam. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm just going with this one, but I'm like, in his head, he's like, oh yeah, there's more foam here. And then it worked. And so I'm like, yeah, these things just have a hair more. He's like, okay, let's make some new ones that are just from that original file, you know, like thin it out for the next ones. And so it's kind of funny, but like he picked that up.
That is so astute.
Yeah. A half a liter out of 29 liters is pretty, I mean, it's a big deal, but it's just funny.
Yeah. Well,
is that kind of stuff.
You talked about everybody wanting a ghost. It's funny. I think there's a fallacy kind of in surfboard marketing, or in that everybody wants a ghost because they've seen what Jon does on the ghost, but probably 0% of people who got the ghost are able to do what Jon does on the ghost.
0% can do that on any board for sure.
You know what I mean? So like how,
for sure. But here's what I think about boards is that like, obviously, like, and like people sometimes comment like, will that make me surf like Jon? Ha ha. You're just like, of course not. Obviously, we all know that. But what we do, like for me, my job is just to make whatever level guy it is to surf as good as they can.
Of course.
That's what I'm thinking of doing, right? So like if a guy can just barely go down the line, hopefully I can make him a board that he can start doing a cutback, you know, or whatever it is. If the guy rips, but he's kind of like, so whatever it is, just to have them maximize their level, or even hopefully, ideally, you know, raise their level of surfing because they're on a board that works good. That's what I focus on. And like, the Ghost is a funny thing. It's one of the first boards, not the one, I don't know about the first, but in recent times, I would say that it's probably the only model or design that guys are riding in CTs that really can translate over to somebody that's like not that good at surfing. Like that board works pretty good in like average waves for an average surfer. It doesn't have to be like barreling giant pumping waves for it to work good for a guy that isn't that good at surfing, right? Like you don't have to, it's not like it's going to make a guy do some carving super gnarly turn, but it does have this great flotation. It has easy paddling. It's loose enough when you stand on the tail. It's like, has all these characteristics that help regular people surf. And most boards like the CT guys are riding are not going to help you surf better. They're going to, unless you're a really good surfer.
Yeah. So what elements of the board service both ends of the spectrum?
Well, it has lower entry rocker than almost any, like there's no like nose flip. It's not thinned out through the nose. So you don't have like this wasted front end that's pushing against you, that's making you almost work harder paddling, and doesn't, if you're not like going up and doing vertical snaps, having a thinned out narrow nose isn't going to help you surf better. Having like that fuller thickness through up under your chest and up into the nose, and then lower entry rocker, it's really helpful paddling wise. Like you're going to catch waves a lot easier. And then it's a little fuller through the nose, which is actually like a little more stable. So if you ride one, like Jon rides a 6.0, that's his shortboard, and he's taller than his board, you know? So
yeah,
if you ride if you're 6.0 and you don't surf that good and you get a 6.4 Ghost, that thing's going to be stable and fun and smooth surfing, and you know,
so don't take Jon's approach of riding one shorter than yourself. Ride it the way that you would normally ride a shortboard.
Depending on your level, you know, if you're above average or really like good surfer, then easily and no problem, that's going to work great. You want to ride something that you can, like, you know, it doesn't have to be bigger than you. It could be smaller than you and work good. But it's just like our boards in general, like the majority of guys buying a board of any brand aren't like top surfers or even advanced surfers. Probably they're probably most people are kind of like middle of the road, I would say, you know, for my company in particular, at least I would think, just based on like what kind of boards we make and all that. So the boards are simple. They're not like overly tuned in one direction or the other. They're like user friendly. Really, I would describe the Ghost as real user friendly.
For so many years, surfers and shapers worked to design specific boards for specific venues. How have you guys locked into a board design and size that Jon rides at Pipe and Margaret's and Beach Breaks
and Sunset and everything? Yeah,
right. I mean, it's crazy.
He's just a super freak. Like that's the only guy that does that, I think. I don't know, but he really is a person that kind of likes to eliminate variables in situations and like kind of keep things consistent. Like he kind of like pretty much like eats the same thing for breakfast every day or something. You know, he's like one of those guys. He's like a weird little genius with his stuff. And so for him, we've always done things like he was riding the Shadow for a long time too, which was based off the Ghost rocker. It was like a more high performance outline version of that, which is a really good board too. And he was stoked on that. It worked great for him, but he's like, I just want to get it down where like I just have this one design for the whole year for everything. And so he's just tuned it closer and closer and closer to that. And we've worked on it to get it where it's more just different dimensions. So it's like, oh, there's a shorter, wider, thicker version of that. They're not all the same. You know, it's not like he's just like, this is the 160 and the 162. There's different tweaks on that as far as dimensions and volume and stuff. He'll say like, let me get a 60 that's like 31 liters and with a little tiny bit wider tail. And that'll be like for smaller waves. And I changed little nuances in the bottom for him and just I tune little things that make it work better in those conditions. It's tricky for me because for like, I've watched him in heats before. I remember specifically this heat in, it was in France against Keanu Singh in these little lefts, probably 2016 or 7, maybe even before that, 15 maybe. And I see him paddle out and it was like kind of these weak shoulder high lefts, and Keanu Singh's a pretty small little guy. So it was bigger for him basically. And then Jon's riding a board and And I'm like, dude, I made him other boards for small, like he should have switched boards. Like I had other boards for him for those conditions that I feel like maybe would have worked better, but he's just stuck to his thing. He's like, I started the contest on this board. I'm riding it all the way through kind of thing. And he lost. And I was just like, oh, I was losing it. I'm just like, dude, there's a board in your board bag that you could have won that heat on, I think, but that's just the way he was at that time, And so now we've tried to kind of eliminate that problem.
Does Tyler ride a wider range of designs?
Tyler does. Tyler rides, she's funny. She tends to, like she rode this board. I have a board called the Radius, which is like, it's the board that when Jordy picked my board for the stab thing, stab in the dark, he loved that board. And like that board had the same rocker, was the board that Dane Reynolds loved, but it was the Dane one was a hand shape, but with the same rocker in it. And then the Jordy one, and it's called the Radius, and Tyler loves that board. And it has a lot of rocker for my boards. It has a ton of rocker through the whole bottom. And so it's not like a groveler board, but I remember she rode it at Manly, like waist high Manly, and was just ripping on it. I'm like, that board's not meant for that. But like, you learn as a shaper, like, hey, there's no rules, right? It's like, hey, this board is supposed to do this. This is my theory. And then a surfer can take it and do something completely different with it. So you have to kind of be like, instead of like, no, that's not a good thing. You're just like, well, if that feels good to you, then go with it,
Totally.
But she, the way that Tyler even came to me, the way that we ended up working together was when she came back from being sick for so long, and she was basically like kind of transformed, she almost was like talking with her about it. Not like, I haven't gotten deep into like the psychological stuff about it, but like physically she lost like, I think like 40 pounds or something.
Wow.
Like a lot. And she's a small person, she's not a big person at all. And she lost a lot of weight. She told me in kilos, I forget what it was, but I think it was like at least like 25 pounds or something. It was significant. Right. And so she was having kind of trouble on the boards that she had been riding. They didn't work for her because they were made for her other body and her other physicality, that was different at the time. And so I've known the Wright family for years. I actually met him, like I was talking about Mikey being here in Ulus when he was like 13. It was like that family used to always come here every summer and just hang out, surf here. They're really like Owen, Tyler, and Kirby, her sister, and Mikey. And they have an older brother too. I forget his name, and the whole family would be here. So I've known him for a long time. And so it wasn't like some random, like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. It was like this kid I'd known, Tyler.
Sure.
And she just asked to try a few boards, and Micro Hall kind of reached out to me too. And they're like, yeah, can we just try a few boards? Like, she just has like she's just not sure about boards. She was trying JS's. She was trying, because for me, like I'm friends with Matt Biolas, and I try to stay, I don't like to poach. I try not to step on people's toes, because I feel it personally, like it's a personal thing, it's like, no matter what anybody says, if you are making boards for someone and someone else makes boards for them, you feel it's a little weird. It's like your wife going on a date with another guy or something, you just don't, you got a relationship, you want to keep it good. But, so I just I'm like, well, what do you think? If you talk to Matt and like, he's cool with it, I'll make you, cause she was like, I just don't know what I'm going to do or whatever. So we just had some communication where I felt like, I still felt a little strange, but I felt okay, like about trying it out and making some boards. And I made her 4 boards. I made her like I made her a ghost. I made her a shadow. I made her a radius, and I made her something else. I can't even remember, but, and I didn't even put any logos on them. Like I just left them. I just signed them. I'm like, I'm not going to, let's just see how this goes. Whatever. I don't want to be like, you're riding my boards, whatever. And so those boards, she rode them. She was in Hawaii. She picked up some boards and she just clicked with them really well. She really loved them. Like I walked down to VLAN one day and she was out surfing, and Glenn was on the beach watching her. And he ran up to me. He's like, mate, she's loving them. Like he was so excited. It was pretty cool. It was a neat moment for me.
Yeah.
Because I've always loved her surfing. Like I'm a Tyler fan, regardless of what board she's on. She's such a good surfer and a super nice person.
Well,
So
that's an example of somebody who is writing something else. They mixed it up and saw the benefits. Do you think that Jon would benefit from writing other shapers boards and mixing it up every once in a while?
he's tried a few boards from other people. Like there's been times it hasn't been for a long time, but he's had different, obviously I've I've fended off a lot of, not I haven't fended it off, but there's been a lot of hostile takeover attempts. And so he's tried boards, but it's funny, his personality and the way he is almost like keeps him from doing that. Like he's just like he's just like, I want to get this tuned in. I'd rather, he's like, he'd rather take something and like refine it than just like, oh, scrap that. Let's just jump over to here. But that said, so I don't know. I think it wouldn't be like some terrible thing for him to try other boards, but I just don't know that he would like them because the boards he's riding are so tuned to him right now. That said, we do things where we didn't do it this year, but in previous starting, like before this tour starts, there's like a 2-month, the old schedule was like, there'd be a 2-month break between pipeline and whatever, 2.5 months. And so what I would do then is just go, I would make him like 4 or 5 boards that were just completely unique to him. And even to me, like I might take like a model and mess around with it, or I might make just brand new short boards, just different stuff, and make one of each and just go, here, try these, see if something suits you, if there's something that sticks out to you. And so those have been things that he has liked, or there's things he's just like, oh, like he'll take 5 boards and like 2 of them are just like, no. And then the other 2 are like, yeah, these ones were like, so I think we could do it. And then one would be like, this one was pretty good. Let's go down this route and see what we can do. So even though those are still my boards, they are more like he's kind of trying something fresh in a way, because even for myself, I'm going somewhere new, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So I try to I just want to make sure he's always like fired up on what he's writing,
Yeah. And I mean, the reality is, I don't know that any other shaper could really provide him with anything that you can't. Like if he did have he's checking out other boards, I would imagine. And if he had some idea that he wanted to implement, you can implement it for him.
Totally. Like I remember in Japan, he was like, when he went to the Olympics, and it was just like going to be, the forecast was just miserable, whatever, it was so small. And then he was kind of looking at some other boards and he's like, oh, I like this like wider tail block of this or whatever, there's little things that or like, it doesn't have a hip right here, it's a little straighter, just little details. And he sees stuff. He's not like, he's very like in tune with seeing, when he looks at a board, he knows what he's looking at. So he'll come back with like little things of like, what if we tried this? And I'm always like, sure, let's do it. Let's make it, which is fun.
A couple of questions just about you personally and your business. It seems like the growth of your brand has actually been really measured and maybe even slow growth. Was that by design, or what's your policy on that?
I'm not a good businessman, first of all.
Okay.
So let's just speak perfectly clear. My wife is really smart, and if she doesn't know about something, she'll learn about it. Like she's gnarly. Like she has her teaching credentials. She got her commercial pilot's license. She's in acupuncture school right now. And she's helped run our whole business for the entire time from day one, basically. And she no longer works entirely, like she's pulled herself away from our business. We have somebody, Dan McNamara, that runs our whole global thing from California, from San Clemente, actually. And where our headquarters is in Oceanside, like our California headquarters. So Dally has been like super important for the whole business to grow. And like her thinking is a lot, we kind of have opposite ways of thinking. I'm like the creative guy, and she's like the numbers, and she's looking at spreadsheets in the other room right now. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
But so in the beginning, I would say it was just like, hey, I just love what I do. And I wanted to make surfboards. Once I started making surfboards, I was like, this is what I want to do. But it was like, we can't survive on this. So she was working, she would bartend, and she started teaching, and she's always had these jobs that brought in money until our business actually grew enough that it could support her with a salary, you know? And, but basically this short answer is yes, we've just done it organically. We own the business ourselves. We have never taken like investment money or anything like that. So we're not like, we don't have any like, there's no one like looking over our backs going like, why aren't the numbers going up, or why isn't this happening or whatever. So we could always just be comfortable with what we're doing. We're totally self-funded. We put all the money that we make back into the business pretty much. Like we get paid a salary and stuff, but like it all goes, we just put the money back into the business to grow it. And it's grown a lot. And obviously COVID, I think most people know that COVID pretty much like threw gasoline on the surfboard fire and just went like it was crazy. Like it went pretty nuts. But now it's kind of slowing down.
Sure.
But it definitely has been like, hey, let's just do this organically. We don't need to be the biggest. I want to go surfing every day and like do other things. I'm not like worried about like I have a plywood sign on the side of my building in Hawaii, you know what I mean? Like that someone painted. I don't have like some neon or picture box painting, you know. I try not to like waste money and just like spend on stuff to like look bigger and better or whatever, and just kind of make it work. It's a family business basically. And,
so what is the factory in Hawaii? Do you have your own lamination shop? How many employees
I do now.
do you
We
have?
actually, we have, it's pretty cool. We have this space in the sugar mill in Wailua, which is like the only industrial area, industrial buildings on the North Shore. And it's just this rad, like, it looks like a movie set of like a surfboard company. Like if you're like, let's build this, you just like, here it is. It's like, it's just dirty and old and these big
Rusted.
buildings. And we got into that. So I built out the space. We had a 2-story space and just added shaping rooms. We just had to put in some walls basically. And so I have 2 shaping rooms. I have my head shaper guy that helps me there, and me. And we have our own shaping machine in-house there in the building. And then we also have like offices. There's an office upstairs. I just built myself my first office I've ever had in my whole life. Built it and drywalled it and painted it myself. That's the kind of like weird guy I am. I'm like, I don't need to pay someone to do this. Like I can do this, you know, like, and then we have downstairs, we have it's probably 800 square foot retail space. So we have like, it's packed with 250 stock boards right now. And we call it Pyzel Surf Supply. And it's like, the whole theory with it was like, it doesn't have a bunch of extra shit. It's just like, you can walk in there and you could get everything you need and get in your car and go down to the beach and go surfing. You could walk in there with nothing, and you could walk, as long as you had a pair of trunks on. We even have a couple pairs of Florence trunks now, but we have like fins, leashes, pads, wax, surfboards. That's it. That's all you need in Hawaii. You know, we don't have wetsuits, but it's a huge thing. So for us, that's been awesome, where we have a retail space where people can come in and like walk out with a board. Some people will come there sometimes to like order a custom board, and then they end up walking out with like, they order the custom, but they're like, well, this looks really good too, I'll take that or whatever. Or they come in there with their partner, and their partner ends up going out with a board too or whatever. And then so we have that. So that's like the Hawaii headquarters. And then right next door, last year we built, we've always sent out all our glassing. I have two guys, glass shops that I work with there. One's called Monsta and one's called Third Stone, and they do all of our glassing. But last year there's a space that kind of came up right next door to our building that was just like a slab of cement and like a carport roof basically. Mm-hmm. And so I rented that and then built walls around it all. And so we made a glass shop for ourselves, but it's not very big. Like I think we have 10 racks on the floor, which is pretty small for like, it's not like some giant production thing, but we can do epoxies in there. We do a lot of epoxy, and then I do like all my team boards. So I can shape a board in the day and like give it to somebody the next day. You know, I'm like, hey, I need you to do these 5 boards. Jon's leaving, or whoever it is. Nathan's going to chase some swell in Tasmania, or whatever's happening. We can just push stuff through there really quick, which is nice. And then when we don't have team stuff to do or whatever, we feed them stock boards and anything else, it's really cool. And like, I have a couple good guys that I know that friends of mine that are working in there for me.
Got it.
It's pretty sick. So,
and then where do you build boards around the world otherwise?
Well,
Bali,
our main thing for America is in Oceanside. And I think the first time we ever talked was years and years ago, was in Oceanside.
Yep.
And that we talked, I think, in the Arctic factory, maybe, or something, right? So at that time we had a little tiny place there, but now we have like 3 warehouse spaces and a retail store there too. But it's further down the road, but it's in that neighborhood, but a little bit down the road there. And that's where we build the majority of our boards for America.
Got it.
And it's pretty cool because we have one glass shop that we work with only. And it was this guy, his name's DJ Kane, and actually MB, Michael Barron.
Yep.
He, DJ is my head shaper over there and has been for like, I don't know how many years, a long time. But it started out, the head shaper job was like, can you do these 5 boards this week? Like there's just like a little trickle of like starting it going. And it's pretty cool because from that, he's doing boards, he's shaping boards for me. And then like it got a little more busy, and actually MB started helping too, because his business kind of changed a little bit. And then they decided, they're like, hey, we're gonna I was sending boards out to get glass to other places there. And they're like, we're gonna buy a glass shop. Like there's this glass shop coming up for sale. We're gonna buy it. And like, do you think you could give us some work? And I was already kind of committed to this other situation. And so I'm like, look, I can't like just pull the plug on these other guys, but like, I'll start trickling you like our customs. Like we'll put our stock through this other thing. I'll trickle you customs and see how it goes. And just, I can't promise you anything, but like, I'll do what I can. And at this point, it worked out really good where those guys do 100% of our glassing now. Their glass shop has gotten like 3 times bigger. We pay them. I love it. Like we write giant checks to those guys every week, but it's so cool because it's like DJ started out just helping me out a little bit. And now he's like running this giant glass shop, and he's shaping and MB, and it's just like, it's cool because it's not like we all got lifted up by like my business getting better. It's pretty sick. Like
that's amazing.
DJ was saying, DJ's like, when we started this, I remember thinking like, if we could just do 30 boards a month, we'll be great. And he's like, now we're doing 30 boards or more a day.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's pretty gnarly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats to them.
It's so cool. And it's neat because I know the quality will be incredible. I know like everything that's coming out of there is so good. Like DJ himself can build a board from start to finish. MB is like one of the legends of the industry. Like these 2 guys together that own it and watch over it all are just all time. And so I don't even ever have any worries about what's going on there. Like I just know that we're like building the best boards we can. It's really cool. So it feels good.
That's really where my questioning was going is, we talk about a lot of different business models that exist in the surf world, and also try to maintain a certain level of conscientiousness about environmentalism, like not shipping boards around the world. And but the problem with building boards in a lot of different locations is managing the quality. But it sounds like that's a decade-long relationship. The one in Bali is decades long, and
everywhere. Like so that is the other part of your first question about like, where do you build boards? Is we do build boards all around the world, which is really cool. And it's developed through the same thing, like the same way the Bali thing is like in most places that my boards are being built, it kind of developed from me going there and shaping, and then they're doing the boards. And now it's turned into like licensing things where they're building them without me there.
Right.
And so we're doing boards. Like I went to Portugal twice a year for like 15 years and shaped. It was crazy. Like I think I figured out I spent like almost 2 years living in Portugal over the amount of time, like all the times I've been there, or like a year and a half, something crazy. But so we're building boards in Portugal and in France for our Europe thing. And then we have in the UK, we have another licensee, a separate one. So those are the 3 people covering that continent. And then we build boards in Japan. We used to build all the boards for Japan in Hawaii and then ship them to Japan, but it got too busy in the last couple of years. So we've shifted that model away from that, where my Japanese guys have got their own shaping machine. They have a good shaper they're working with. So they're building the boards in Japan instead, which is nice. We're actually providing them shape blanks before. We'd ship them shape blanks and then they'd glass them there anyways, because Japan has this really high standard of glassing that somehow we can't even, I don't know. It's an interesting little thing. Any shaper will tell you it's kind of crazy. But and then we're doing boards in Bali, Peru, Brazil, South Africa, and that's it, I guess. But basically every continent. It's pretty crazy. So we're not shipping boards anywhere except for like little things where we ship stuff. And it's nice to just like, we're giving like guys in those countries jobs. Yeah. Like everybody is we're creating these little mini micro, cosm of work and environment for people to work in, which is pretty cool, of like craftsmen that get to do work. It's awesome.
So you talk about last year or through COVID, everything really exploded. Business was at an all-time high. We're starting to see things slow down now. Are those businesses structured in such a way that they can make that adjustment downward, or is there overhead that you got to maintain?
I think it's up to each person, right? Each guy running their business. And I think that most everybody that I worked with and work with now, I've been working with pre-COVID. We did make a switch in Brazil and we've added in France and in Europe. But in general, it's people that I've been working with before this giant boom. So I would think that ideally they can shrink back down a little bit. Okay. I don't know for sure. I know, like, for example, with DJ, like in Oceanside, those guys are doing all of our boards every week, but they're turning down work from other shapers all the time. So like if they want to keep it at that level and I'm slowing down, they could bring in stuff from the outside, I would think. I think everybody is going to slow down equally. So it's hard to say how that kind of demand will go. But I think like even in Hawaii, we're like, okay, we don't need as many people working in the shop right now. Like it's been a pretty significant thing. So I would think that everybody's going to get pretty affected by it, but hopefully have it structured well to make it work for them,
It sounds like because of the slow growth that we talked about, you've kept a real kind of tight belt on the business. Is there a way for you to improve the business at this point with a little bit of hindsight and now a little bit of
I'd say the biggest thing is like, it's all about overhead in that business. Like the margins, I see people like talking about how expensive surfboards are and just like, they feel like they're getting ripped off and that we're just killing it and all this stuff. And it's so frustrating to me because I feel like I get it. I would look at that from the outside too and be like, a surfboard's $900 or $800 or whatever it seems like a lot, but it's like, God, if you look at, I think Stab has been doing some pretty good articles on it recently.
Fantastic.
I encouraged them to do that. And I'm like, you guys didn't even talk to me about this, but it's awesome.
I didn't want to bother you.
It's not awesome, but it's like, I want people to understand, like, those things are handmade. Every surfboard, I mean, you've talked to a million shapers through your podcast. Yeah. And everyone says the same thing. It's like, dude, what other handmade things do you get? And then you're like, this is so expensive. And then you're like, well, time travel back 10 years and it's like almost the same price as it is today. I know. It's insane. And the cost to build stuff is just skyrocketing. So for me, I can't change like how much resin costs. I can't change any of that stuff. All I can do is like try to keep our overhead down. Try not to waste money on stuff that we don't need. Try not, just it's almost like it's easy to forget the little things, but I try to kind of focus on that sometimes where maybe I sound like crazy to people too. They're like, you really care about that $50? Like we sold this many surfboards this year, whatever, but it's like every $50 counts, So I just try to keep an eye on like the small things. And my wife's really good at that. Like I said, she's really good at like, hey, let's go through like our P&L and see where what's happening and where we're spending stuff. And why was this much? And, so we try to keep track of that stuff and keep it down as much as possible.
Well,
and just be smart.
You started by saying you're not a very good businessman, but I think you've become a good businessman. That's an old mentality that you're holding on to.
Yeah, maybe I've definitely learned a lot along the way. I started off like Dally, my wife will be like, you didn't even like, you haven't even written a check in 20 years, you know, like she's like, you don't even pay the bills. And like, we have a funny quote where one day she misquotes me on it or misunderstood it, but I said, don't taxes just do themselves? And she's just like, what is wrong with you? You know, and I meant like, no, like the money gets taken out of your paycheck or whatever, you know. She's just like, oh yeah, taxes just do themselves, honey. Just
right. It's the one thing that doesn't do itself, and you'll get screwed if you don't do it.
Exactly. But yeah, I just you know, I've learned, my wife's taught me a lot. I've learned a lot just through like dealing with stuff. I feel like I have a strength of just kind of like knowledge of the business in general and kind of like how it goes. And I just and I have smart people working for me, like not beyond my wife, like our guy Dan is really smart in a lot of ways. Like he just really knows how to like look at the big picture of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is nice because I'm more of like a day-to-day, like I kind of live in the moment more than that, and don't worry too much about that, I would say. But yeah, I'm learning. It's a long process. I'm 53.
Yeah.
I know taxes don't do themselves now. And
good. That's a big one.
One thing I'll say, one thing I wanted to just say about, because I'm really experiencing it right now, is it's so funny because the whole world of surfing, of surfboards was just booming 2 years ago. You know, 2 years of like, we had every month was the biggest month of the year for like a year straight. Like you're like, and next month it was bigger. I can't believe it. And then it's finally like starting to go down, or at least leveling out, or I had to say it's probably starting to drop. And then here, so the whole time in Bali was just shut down completely, right? These guys were like, they had nothing to do. There's there's not any surfers, you know, you've seen that, like, sure, like Chloe Andino and Kelly Slater came here or whatever, but like there weren't people here like the way it is normally. And so they were just dead, with like the factory was shut down basically. And now it's so funny coming here, it's open. I just had a meeting yesterday with Basti, who does my boards here. He's like, it's crazy. We can't make boards fast enough. Like, it's like the opposite is going on here. It's so bizarre, but it's neat to see, because it's like, okay, you guys are back. Like all the restaurants are opening back up, and all these people that I've known that are like, oh, we barely made it through, but like we still have our business, and we kept our employees on salary and tried to, you know, just make sure everyone's good. And it's neat to see here where people are all of a sudden like, they're experiencing kind of what we experienced 2 years ago. All of a sudden they're like, it's boom down.
Awesome. Pretty big. I'm glad to hear that. Awesome. Yeah. And if they could survive that, I mean, what a learning experience for the business. I feel like you'll never run fat again. You'll just always keep a tight belt. How often do you ride other shaper surfboards?
I'm not like opposed to it by any means, but I tend to just, I can't even remember the last board I rode that was somebody else's. Like I've ridden Timmy's, I've ridden like Tokoro's, I've ridden a lot of different guys. I mean, just kind of popping off the top of my head, but I haven't ridden a different shaper's board in a long time. And it's only because I like to make myself boards so much. And like, especially now we have this glass shop where I'm like, oh, cool, I can just shape this and hand it out in a couple of days. I got a new board, you know? So I make myself a lot of boards, and I tend to like switch them around. I just want to try different things and whatever. So I don't necessarily ride that many other guys' boards, but it's not because I like don't believe in it or something like that. You know, I'm a shaper fan. Like I love all these guys. Like it's pretty rad.
If you could order a board, if you can get a board from anybody on the planet, what do you think you would order?
I think I'd love to have, I've thought of this a lot, but I think one of my favorite boards would be, I'd love to get a board off Simon Anderson.
Yeah.
And like get kind of like not necessarily maybe like his original thruster, because that thing was just so like, but some kind of like version of that, something in there that's just kind of, I don't know. I think that'd be pretty cool.
That's a great pick.
Yeah. I mean, he had such a huge, I mean, every day he has such a huge influence over what we're riding. It's pretty crazy. And then he's a cool guy. I like Simon a lot. And I met him at Uluwatu. Like it's funny down here.
Way.
Yeah, the first time I ever met him, he's just sitting there, like he's very stoic.
Yep.
He's just sitting kind of off. Like we all hang out at this one we're wrong down by where you can see the surf, and like it's like you leave your board down there the whole time you're here. You start a tab when you get here and like pay it when you leave. You know, like literally your daily, it's like write down what you ate and what you drank every day yourself. And then at the end of the trip, like add it all up. And Simon hangs out at that same wrong. And that's like where I met the Wrights and stuff too. It's funny. But he was just so stoic, and I was kind of like scared to say hi to him, you know, and finally I'm like went up and introduced myself, and he's so cool. He's awesome.
Did he know who you were?
Probably not. I don't even remember really, to be honest. But we ended up meeting another time later at my at DJ and MB's factory in California when they were doing, because MB was doing Simon Anderson. He was doing all the Quicksilver boards, you know, so he's doing Simon's boards for him in California. So I met him again there, and he's like, oh yeah, you know. But now I'm wherever I see him, you know, there's a cool little like fraternity of shapers around the world that it's pretty awesome. Like, I don't know. I always like, I feel like I'm like maybe not like the young guy necessarily, but like the newer member of the group or something, you know? And I'm pretty proud to be one of those guys. It's pretty sick.
Well, you won't remember this at all, but I actually met you in Portugal probably 9 years ago. It was the first time I ever met you. Yeah, it was at that factory. Is the factory Pollen? Yeah.
In Qashqai.
Yeah, exactly. You must have been working there at the time, but I just dropped in to like grab something. And I recognized you, and the guy that I was talking with there introduced me to you, and you were, good news, you were very, very cordial and pleasant.
You're all like, guy's not putting on an act.
No, he wasn't. You weren't. And I was just like, oh, hey, good to meet you or whatever, and was on my way. But I did appreciate that you were, because you were definitely on the rise then. Like John was already certainly famous. I don't think he was on tour yet, but he was certainly famous. So
you know, it's funny. That's so cool. That place is rad too. Like you spent some time over there then.
A little bit.
Was that one of your few trips there? Or you been there a few times or?
A few times. Yeah.
Such a great country. I love it there. Like,
me too.
I mean, those guys, the guy that probably introduced you to me, Alvaro, is like, they're like family to me. Like they're just so rad and obvious. Like I literally would spend a month a year living with them. So they are kind of family-ish, but that place was gnarly. I'd go there and just like power 120 boards in like a week, and just crazy. Like, it was brutal. So I'd just be like, and I'd have to talk to customers in between stuff, because they're like, come in and meet him and let's custom order every board. And I'm just like, I got to get back in. My fingers would literally be like, I'd tape them up because they're bleeding almost, like just like you just raw fingertips. It was pretty awesome.
But
those guys are really special.
Yeah. Good people. Yeah. Do your daughters have any interest in getting involved in the business?
No, I've never even thought of that. My youngest daughter is like full on horses. She lives in Colorado with her, like in the same town where her grandpa lives, and is a horse trainer. She's 19. She actually moved out when she was 17 because she was over there for the summer to work. And then she's like, I'm going to move back here after my last year of high school anyways. Like, why am I coming home? It's COVID. I'm going to go look at a computer for school. Like, can I just stay here? And so she trains horses. She lives in a barn dominium, which is like this giant barn, but it has a 2-bedroom house built inside of it. So you walk out of her door of her house and there's like tractors and stuff in the other part of the barn. And then next door is this huge arena, an indoor arena. And she's in charge of like 8 or 9 horses there. And she trains, people come and she trains their horses and trains them on riding and all this stuff. So she has no surfboard interest whatsoever. She surfs occasionally, but no. And then my older daughter, Indy, is 24, and she has her own highly successful bikini business already. And so she's like, she probably makes more money than me. She's doing great. She doesn't want to get all dusty and dirty, and she's doing fine. So good. But they'll come in and they love the business and the family business part of it, you know?
Yeah,
but
sure.
Like it is kind of sad. I'm like, what if I had taught one of my kids to shape, you know?
Yeah.
They just never really did that part.
They have their own passions, it sounds like. So good for them.
Yeah. That's pretty.
What surf media are you following nowadays?
Well, like I said, I used to like buy all the magazines. I used to like, I remember we were so poor. My wife would like, we had subscriptions. I'd have subscriptions like Surfing or Surfer, both. But like they always got into the newsstands. Like they'd get into the grocery store before they came in the mail. So I would just buy it. And she's just like, we can't afford that magazine. What are you doing? It's like, it was $5. She's like, we're broke. What are you? She's all, you're going to get it in a week. I'm like, that's too long.
That's funny.
But I love Surfer's Journal to read. But what I think basically every day I look at Stab and I look at Beach Grit. Those are like all my favorites, and which are very like not polar opposites, but definitely some just opposite views. Beach Grit's more like just kind of gives me a laugh and some entertainment, but there's always like in all that laugh and making fun, there's a little truth somewhere,
Yeah.
Often stretched truth, but and those guys are smart, like Chaz and Derek are pretty intelligent guys that have been around a lot of stuff. So I like to see their perspective on things. I'm slightly cynical about the surf world itself. I find myself like, I'm not like all in on pro surfing, and I'm not all in on like the WSL is the best. Like, but at the same time, when you see the opposite and I'm like, the WSL sucks, it's the worst. I'm like, well, you don't have to watch it and you don't have to deal with it if you don't want to. And like, somebody's just paying for you to be able to watch it, which is pretty cool. And sure, I see a million things that could be changed or fixed or whatever. And it seems like common sense that you'd be like, oh, of course you're going to do it this way. And then they're like, we go that way a lot. But at the same time, you know what I think? I know you guys love talking about the WSL, like you and Chaz. I think I heard you just the other day say like, we almost went a whole podcast without bringing it up or something. But I think one of the important things, or not important, but something to keep in mind is like, there's things that seem not to make any sense, but then they do have like a solid reason behind them some other way. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why are they doing this? And then you realize like, you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And then there's like this one piece and you're like, oh, now that does make perfect sense. They're doing it that way. Like, I get it or whatever, I don't know. So I try not to judge them too harshly, but at the same time, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you people sometimes,
Totally.
But then I go, oh, I can just click on this and watch it for free. And it's got a great quality production. And it's, I think I read, or somebody said somewhere, maybe it was you guys, somebody, but like that they had 9 hours of surfing to get rid of 4 people.
Right. I talk about that all the time.
That's insane, right?
Well,
that's
they
crazy.
run it's 2 days of competition is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's more than 9 hours to get rid of 4 people. And
and 3 of them are people you already know they're going to be gone for sure anyways, right? Like there's like 3 wild cards and a random guy.
Exactly. And by the way, even the 4th person was never a threat to win the event, or certainly not a world title, and that's been consistent in every single contest for years now. So it's not just like a fluke. It's a lot of evidence that something needs to change.
No, I agree. Well, even watching like watching the snapper, what is it? The Challenger Series thing. It was like refreshing. Like these guys just win or lose this heat. Like they're done.
Exactly.
Killer. 2 guys are gone. 2 people are moving on. Like that was awesome, I thought. And that kind of thing. And then the cut, I think I really like it personally. And I understand, like, I find it like, I know most of the guys in these contests, like I've known them, most of them for quite a while. So I don't want to see anybody like, yeah, of course I want you to like have a good job and do whatever. But like, at the same time, it's like, we would like to make this exciting and interesting and like a little more compact. I'm really curious to see, like, once we get like this next contest will be interesting to see, like Gland is going to be, I'm pointing to it. It's over there. It'll be cool to see it and to see how it works, and like all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is a streamlined little thing and could be sick,
Well, I think like in an ideal, I know that there's parts that I don't that I'm not privy to, like you said, that would make other things make sense. But if we just start from the top, and what I would like to see is the best surfers in the world in the best waves. And that will be entertaining enough, and it'll be dramatic. There's enough inherent drama in that. And it'll solve so many of these little squabbles that we end up having with,
For sure.
Measuring a 6'5" versus a 6'7" at a beach break. Like, what is the actual objective difference between that? It's very hard to define. So when you put people in barreling big reef passes, it's a lot easier to see kind of who the best is. But what that also does, and what the WSL should be striving for, is the best surfers in the world, John Florence, Gabriel Medina, Jack Robinson even, have been honing their skills in the best waves in the world.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to see. You want to see the Formula One drivers shaving seconds off of lap times and microseconds. And when you run a lot of events in beach breaks and John or in wave pools, and John is losing to people, like, it's putting a Formula One driver in a go-kart. And now these professional go-kart drivers are able to beat John in that. It's a regressive format that does not progress surfing. And Jack almost got booted off tour last year. Thankfully, in Mexico, he was able to win an event and he came back. But if we were to see people like Jack Robinson, who spent decades honing that skill for the best waves in the world, that only very few people can actually ride to that level, it would be an utter shame. So I think those are the big pieces that I feel like the WSL needs to prioritize, because then the little pieces will actually take care of themselves.
It all basically boils down to shortening the event time, because there's no way to control nature. Like, you can't, no matter what, every surf spot gets shitty, right? Like G-line gets shitty. Anything, Chopes gets flat, whatever. But if you have 10 days or 12 days at that spot and you only need 2 days to run a contest, you have a much, much higher chance of getting good waves. And that's kind of what I see it comes down to more than anything else, is just like tightening that up so that you don't have like that, okay, we're going to run today, even though it sucks. They're like, why are they starting? It's like, because we want to end, it's going to get good in a couple of days. And we want to be able to end in good waves or whatever it is,
You being able to run in one swell is what it comes down to.
Yeah, totally.
Not needing multiple swells.
Yeah, and not having or no swell, one swell and then nothing, right?
Exactly. And for the purpose of what you said at the beginning, which is we're wasting 2 days to get rid of 4 people who are never going to win the event anyways. We know that's already a waste. And that is a full swell window right there, those 2 days.
Well, it's even like boring. You're like, wow, I don't even need to watch this heat. I want to watch like guys ripping. That's what pro surfing, like, that's what like competitive pro surfing is to me, is like guys that are just like, holy shit,
Yeah, totally.
I want to see. Not like, oh yeah, I cursed that one to the beach and got it the score. It's sick. And the whole thing of like, if I was tripping out at Snapper, guys do 30 turns and then they fall on the end and they're like, oh, too bad he didn't finish it. You're like, dude, he rode a wave for 30 seconds and did 100 turns. Who cares if he fell on the last one?
Right.
That kind of stuff just boggles my mind.
Completely.
Like, let it go, people.
Completely. Deducting points after they've already been accumulated is totally backwards.
I can't understand it. Have you watched that? You've been watching, what is it called? Make or Break?
I binged all of it and loved it.
Yeah. So that was a cool thing. Like, I think a lot of people have been like claiming like, hey, what? We need to know more about these people. Like, to me, that's really missing too, is like the people, like, who is this? Who is any of them? What are their personalities like? What drives them? What does this? And that was pretty sweet to like get a view to that. I think it gave people a lot of you can become like a fan of somebody or not. Who cares if you're a fan? Like, hey, I like that guy now. I used to think he was a dick. I now understand why he acted like that and and like, it's pretty cool. Or maybe still like, I still think he's a dick, but like, I get it.
100%. I'm more invested in Gabriel Medina now than I've ever been before. I'm a total fan of his. Matt McGillivray, Morgan Siblik, all of them that they were profiled in there. I loved all of them.
He's like, I'm going to join a frat and just do keg stands tomorrow. It's
right.
It's I was laughing
But-
so hard with that. He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go out till 10 tonight. I'll be home soon. And the next day he's just like dragging himself down to his heat. So I'm like, oh yeah, it's a 21-year-old. Like,
exactly.
that's what you do.
Well, and beyond getting to know the characters, showing the Sage Erickson and Tatiana Weston Webb little scuffle on the beach, epic.
Now what? That's literally my biggest thing with the WSL. I was like, why don't you just show some, like, just why are you trying to make it so fucking nice?
Right.
Like, why is everything so like what? Just like
surfing was never
what
nice to
happened.
me.
Yeah.
Surfing's not nice.
Yeah,
and
and sure, like tons of these guys like each other and are friends, but there's moments of all this stuff and like there's so much behind it, and that I don't know.
They did a great job with that series.
What's that?
They did a great job with that
it
series.
was cool. And
So-
the judge thing was cool too. Having like a little view of the
Yeah.
judges, you're actually hearing what someone has to say and like how they go about it a little bit. Not really that much, but a little bit. It's kind of cool.
While we're on the WSL, who are Jon's and Tyler's biggest threats for the world title this year?
It's funny. I don't know. I mean, I'd say like Philippe, you got to put Philippe Toledo into like the trestles thing. The whole thing to me is I really dislike the that final day thing at trestles, especially. Like I kind of dislike it overall because I feel like that these guys work, like I see the effort that gets put into each event and like what they're doing and like building up, and to have that year long not necessarily consistency, but just like being able to muscle through it all over the whole year, I feel like is a really big deal. And to show that like, hey, I can win in a beach break or a giant wave, whatever it is. I think that's so much more valuable than like, yeah, I made it to the top 5 and then I had a good day at trestles. Last year was like everything came out right. Medina was in the lead on the thing, and that was fine. But I just feel like that's just a poor way to run an event or to win a world title. To have it all boil down to one day at trestles just seems silly. That said, I would say Carissa is always like super gnarly, and Philippe Toledo, Italo. I was surfing with Italo yesterday down here, and he's doing like 8-foot airs on waves that most people are just like casually trying to pump down the line. I'm just like, dude, you're gnarly. What are you doing?
So
You're doing Supermans, just like whatever. But I think everyone's a threat, you know. It just depends on like if it's this big, if it's shoulder high, or if it's pumping, or they're all so good. And then it's just like a matter of like feeling good that day, having things go your way. Obviously, going into that in first place gives you a giant advantage. You surf 3 heats, or it could even be just 2 heats to win the whole thing. But that seems kind of weird, doesn't it? Like I surf 2 heats, but you put yourself in that position by being good all year. So there's a balance to it, I guess. I know that Jon, like I asked Jon about it last year when they started doing that, they were going to do it that way. I'm like, what do you think about that? He's all, it's fine. Like he's awesome where he's just like, I'm going to show up and do my thing. You know, he's not like, oh, damn it, this and that. He doesn't complain about it. He's just like, that's my job. And if that's where they're going to do it, I'll go and do it.
Good.
Do my best. So, which is cool.
Final question is just, what was the last surfboard that you rode? What'd you ride yesterday?
I rode it was fun. My first session on, it's called a mini Ghost. It's like this little chunkier kind of version of the Ghost. I know I've really maxed out the Ghost, but it's like board works so good. It's like I can't help it, and I just want to like play with stuff and do different things. But the rocker on that thing works so good. But it's like it has a little beak. It looks like an 80s board kind of.
Okay.
Like it has a beak and a hip. The one that I rode yesterday, it was actually a swallowtail, which I've never ridden, and it works so good. I was so stoked. It was like, I mean, I was surfing 200-yard long lefts that were overhead and not perfect, but really good. But mini Ghost, and I rode a Pyzel the day before. That was pretty fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you for taking the time away from your family.
Yeah, no worries.
While you're on vacation to do this. I know listeners are eager to hear from you. So
yeah, thanks so much.
Cool.
I appreciate
Gladly.
it too. And I'm glad to clarify the Tyler stuff, which kind of spurred this whole conversation. Huh?
I know it's all in good nature.
Well, thanks a bunch for having me on, and thanks for your time.
All right,
And,
man. No problem.
I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right,
Hang on
bye.
for
Have a
one
good day.
second. Hang on for 1 second.